What if the real cost of Ozempic and Wegovy wasn't printed on the receipt?
Before we go any further, if you want to keep seeing investigations like this, hit like and subscribe now. That's the only quick request I'll make at the start. No other prompts until the end. Now listen carefully. This story begins with a simple idea. A drug that promises relief from weight gain and a powerful tool against type 2 diabetes. It is sold as convenience, as a technological leap. For many people, it has indeed brought quick, measurable changes. Pounds drop, blood sugar numbers improve, headlines celebrate transformed lives and renewed confidence. The marketing paints a tidy arc. Problem, injection, solution. In sound bites and glossy ads, the message is irresistible. Invest a little money, take a weekly shot, and your life will change. But under the gloss, there is friction. Under the headlines, there are patient accounts, clinician conversations, and small but persistent signals in the research that do not fit the simplified narrative. And it is those mismatched pieces, the anomalies, the quiet complaints, the patterns that don't make stockholder calls, that tell the rest of the story. First, the financial model. These drugs, unlike many treatments that are short-term or curative, are administered continuously. The physiology of their effect depends on presence, on ongoing dosing. That means patient lives become recurring revenue lifelines for companies. When you translate that into policy, reimbursement, and marketing strategy, you start to see how the incentives align. The longer a patient remains on therapy, the more value is created for the manufacturer. That alone is not proof of wrongdoing, but it is a structural fact that shapes behavior. Second, the clinical trade-offs. Any medication that manipulates hormones or appetite will cause ripple effects across the body. Some are expected, transient nausea or appetite suppression, and often manageable. Others are less predictable, and only time reveals the full spectrum. Real-world evidence often paints a more complex picture than short clinical trials. Patients report persistent digestive dysfunction, sustained muscle loss in some demographics, mood and cognitive shifts, and in rarer cases, extended healing times after gastrointestinal injury. Third, the rebound problem. Anecdotes and emerging studies suggest a pattern. Once therapy is withdrawn, physiological compensation can lead to an accelerated return of appetite and weight gain, sometimes exceeding pre-treatment baselines. This rebound is not simply a matter of lost behavioral discipline. It may reflect homeostatic mechanisms that the injections suppress temporarily. If you remove that external control, the body's internal regulation may overshoot. That creates a medical and ethical dilemma for clinicians and a practical crisis for patients. Fourth, access and equity. These drugs are costly. Insurance coverage is inconsistent. Many Americans pay out of pocket, and the financial strain can cascade into other areas of life: missed mortgage payments, depleted savings, skipped preventive care for other conditions. The miracle shot becomes another expensive medical subscription, and in many cases a source of stress rather than alleviation. Meanwhile, wealthier patients access these treatments more readily and continue therapy. Less affluent patients often either go without or fall into cycles of partial adherence. Fifth, the cultural transformation. Social media fueled demand in a way no clinical study could. Influencers and celebrity disclosures normalized the use of these drugs for cosmetic weight loss, not only for metabolic disease. That expanded the market dramatically, but also shifted risk profiles. Younger, healthier individuals began using potent medications with little long-term safety data in those populations. The trend changes the risk-benefit calculus for the entire society. All of this is to say, the price of these drugs is complex. It is monetary, yes, but also biological, psychological, and social. When we talk about cost, the easiest items to tally are the pharmacy receipts and insurance claims. But the more consequential prices are paid in terms of the body's adaptability, the patient's future options, and the distribution of health across communities. In the parts that follow, we will unpack each of these dimensions in depth. We will interrogate corporate statements, examine the clinical evidence beyond the press releases, and hear the patterns emerging from patient reports and clinicians on the front line. We will ask uncomfortable questions about incentive structures and regulatory choices. We will also explore the alternatives that are whispered about in small research pockets and traditional medicine practices, not as instant cures, but as pathways worth investigating, This investigation is not an attempt to demonize patients or physicians. Many clinicians prescribe these medications carefully and see genuine benefit for people with life-threatening metabolic disease. What we are examining is the structural landscape, how corporate models, societal pressures, and biological realities interact, and what that means for individuals who take these drugs in good faith. Stay with me. The next segment will quantify the costs, specific price ranges, insurance processes, and the true economic burden on families. And then we'll pivot to the clinical consequences and the scientific debates rarely presented in popular coverage. When Ozempic and Wegovy first hit the market, they weren't presented as ordinary drugs. They were sold as revolutions. News anchors declared them the miracle injections. Magazines splashed headlines calling them the future of weight loss. Celebrities whispered about them in interviews. TikTok flooded with before and after photos. Doctors, pressured by patient demand, began prescribing them at record speed. For many, it sounded like science had finally cracked the code. A simple injection that could melt pounds, stabilize blood sugar, and erase years of frustration. No more endless diets. No more failed gym memberships. No more lectures about willpower. The message was intoxicating. This is the breakthrough everyone has been waiting for. But the closer you look, the more that promise begins to blur, because what was never highlighted in those glossy headlines is how the drugs actually work. Ozempic and Wegovy are not cures. They do not repair the root causes of diabetes or obesity. They override it. They flood the system with a synthetic mimic of GLP-1, forcing the body into compliance. Appetite drops. Digestion slows. Insulin is triggered, and yes, the numbers move. The scale shifts. The blood sugar chart looks cleaner. But here is the part left unsaid. Every one of those benefits is leased, not owned. The moment the drug stops, so do the effects. Patients who believe they had finally found freedom discover something unsettling. Within weeks of stopping, the hunger returns stronger than before. Blood sugar spikes with a vengeance. Weight not only comes back, it often rebounds higher, and yet, these warnings are buried in fine print, spoken quickly in commercials, dismissed as rare, individual variation. What dominates the story are the smiling faces, the glowing endorsements, the airbrushed success stories. It's a perfect illusion, a future where anyone can buy liberation, if only they can pay. But what's missing from that illusion is the growing list of voices quietly saying otherwise. Patients who feel trapped rather than freed, doctors raising concerns about long-term dependence, researchers whispering that we don't yet understand the full risks. And as always, money plays a starring role. Because the marketing isn't aimed only at patients, it's aimed at investors. Pharmaceutical companies highlight growth, not safety. They frame prescriptions as recurring revenue streams, not as lives tethered to monthly injections. Think about that language. Recurring revenue. When you peel away the PR, what's left is not a miracle. It's a subscription model, one where the human body becomes the product, and the customer can never cancel without losing everything. So ask yourself, if these drugs truly were the cure-all solution, why would stopping them undo every gain? Why does health collapse so quickly once the needle is gone? The promise is seductive. The marketing is powerful. The testimonials are polished. But hidden beneath it all is a truth that almost no one wants to say out loud. This is not freedom. This is dependency dressed as progress. Stay with me. Because in the next part, we will pull back the curtain on the financial side of this story. You'll see the numbers, the staggering cost per month, the battles with insurance, and the hidden economic trap that turns a personal health struggle into a billion-dollar machine. When you open the invoice, the figure is shocking but precise. A single box of weekly doses at full retail can easily push past 4 figures per month. Even with manufacturer coupons or short-term assistance programs, patients often confront deductibles, pharmacy networks, and insurer formularies that leave them with unpredictable and sometimes crippling out-of-pocket costs. For a chronic condition, that number compounds quickly. Multiply $1,000 by 12 months and then by years, and you see how a medical therapy becomes a lifetime financial commitment. To understand the mechanism of this trap, you must follow the money and then follow the incentives. Pharmaceutical companies price these agents to reflect not only research and manufacturing costs, but future revenue expectations. Executives speak of lifetime value per patient and market penetration, language more commonly applied to subscription services than to medicine. Sales strategies are therefore engineered to maximize persistence, encouraging continued use through patient support programs, automatic refill systems, and concierge-style services that reduce friction for ongoing purchases. Insurance adds another layer of complexity. Coverage decisions vary widely. While some plans cover GLP-1 agents for diabetes with favorable tiers, many exclude coverage for indications such as weight loss or prioritize older agents. Prior authorizations can be onerous. A clinician may successfully prescribe a drug, only to have the insurer demand documentation, proof of failure on other therapies, or evidence of medical necessity. While some patients navigate this maze with advocacy and time, others fall through, delaying treatment or paying enormous sums out of pocket. Beyond insurance, there's the ecosystem of co-pay cards and patient assistance programs. On the surface, they appear benevolent, helping bridge the gap for those who need treatment. Yet their structures often lock patients into manufacturers' supply chains. A copay card might reduce immediate out-of-pocket cost for a short period, but in many cases, those discounts are contingent on sticking with a branded therapy. When the card expires or eligibility shifts, patients suddenly face sticker price reality. Bankruptcy filings and medically related financial stress are not abstract statistics. Social workers and primary care providers increasingly report patients making trade-offs, skipping other medications, delaying dental care, or taking on high-interest debt. The personal stories reveal a calculus most marketing campaigns never acknowledge. Which bill do I pay this month, the medication refill or the rent? Do I cut back on groceries to afford the shot? Questions like these are not hypothetical. They are lived experiences that ripple through families. There's also a societal cost that rarely factors into balance sheets. As expenses mount, some patients alter behavior in ways that worsen health equity. Those who cannot sustain treatment are more likely to abandon follow-up care, avoid preventive screenings, and withdraw from health-promoting activities because of stress and decreased disposable income. This creates a feedback loop, worsening chronic disease outcomes in communities already disadvantaged by systemic barriers. Pharmacies and clinicians can unintentionally reinforce the subscription model. Auto-refill programs, while convenient, can reduce patient agency. Monthly deliveries on autopilot can mean fewer clinical reassessments and prolonged use without regular review. Pharmaceutical support programs that simplify access may also deprioritize options such as periodic attempts at dose tapering or structured cessation plans, subtly favoring continuity over reassessment. Then there is the hidden lobbying economy. Companies invest heavily in advocacy, pay-to-play relationships with specialty clinics, and educational sponsorships that shape guideline development over time. When your economic model depends on long-term use, the natural institutional behavior is to align scientific focus toward persistence and management rather than eradication or short-term cures. That steering of the scientific conversation, what gets studied at scale, what gets funded, matters profoundly. All of this yields an uncomfortable conclusion. The financial architecture surrounding GLP-1 agents incentivizes long-term use, sometimes at the cost of patient autonomy and broader public health benefit. It is a system where medical decisions, however well-intentioned, intermix with corporate survival strategies. For patients, it can mean a lifetime of injections, a succession of bills, and a sense that health now comes with a monthly subscription. In the next segment, we will move from dollars to biology, exploring the physiological toll these agents can produce when used for prolonged periods and why long-term surveillance matters more than ever. The public conversation often focuses on headlines and before and after photos, but the true biological ledger of any therapy is written in subtle physiological change. When a drug exerts a profound influence on appetite regulation and gut motility, the downstream consequences are rarely limited to weight. They ripple through metabolism, neurology, musculoskeletal structure, and even psychosocial regulation. That is the complexity we must face with GLP-1 agents. First, the gastrointestinal system. GLP-1 analogs slow gastric emptying substantially, which contributes to early satiety and reduced caloric intake. For many patients, this is initially a welcome effect. In medical parlance, it is the mechanism behind weight loss. But prolonged delay in gastric transit can lead to persistent nausea, reflux, bloating, and in some cases, gastroparesis, an inability of the stomach to move contents effectively into the intestines. Gastroparesis is not merely uncomfortable, it impairs nutrition, complicates medication absorption, and in severe cases necessitates enteral support. Second, the musculoskeletal signal. Rapid weight loss is often sold as an unqualified victory. Yet when weight falls quickly, particularly in the absence of coordinated resistance exercise and adequate protein intake, significant muscle mass can be lost alongside fat. This sarcopenic effect undermines physical strength and metabolic resilience. For older adults, the loss of lean mass increases frailty risk, fall hazards, and dependency. Muscle is also a primary sink for glucose disposal. Losing it may paradoxically reduce the body's capacity to manage glucose independently. Third, the endocrine compensation. The body resists change. Endocrine systems are governed by feedback loops designed over evolutionary time to protect against starvation. When external agents blunt appetite and suppress hunger signals, compensatory physiological responses may emerge, alterations in receptor density, changes in downstream neuropeptide expression, and adaptive shifts that can persist beyond the treatment window. This biological memory may explain why some patients experience intense rebound phenomena after stopping therapy. Fourth, psychological and cognitive effects. Appetite and mood are intertwined. Emerging reports suggest that some individuals experience shifts in mood, anxiety levels, and reward processing while on GLP-1 therapy. Dopaminergic circuits that encode food-related reward may recalibrate during prolonged appetite suppression, impacting motivation and pleasure responses across life domains. Some patients describe a blunting of previously pleasurable experiences. Others describe increased irritability. The data are preliminary, but the signals warrant careful monitoring. Fifth, rare but serious adverse events merit attention. Pancreatic safety has been debated. Observational signals and case reports have raised questions about inflammation markers and potential pancreatic stress. The data are complex and sometimes contradictory, but the existence of these signal clusters requires transparent long-term surveillance. Similarly, concerns about gallbladder disease, biliary events, and kidney stress have been raised in various analyses. What matters is not alarmist rhetoric, but rigorous, open post-marketing data collection and honest communication with patients. Clinical trials are designed to detect common and acute events in controlled populations. Real-world application extends the drug to broader, more diverse groups, people with multiple comorbidities, older adults, or those using other medications. The more expansive the user base, the more likely rare or delayed events emerge. This is why ongoing pharmacovigilance and honest post-marketing surveillance are non-negotiable. Critically, many early clinical trials did not prioritize the endpoints that patients now care about most: long-term functional ability, sustained metabolic health after cessation, and quality of life measurements unaffected by financial burden. The endpoints often selected favored measurable short-term weight loss or glycemic indices, metrics that look excellent in press releases, but do not capture the lived experience of prolonged therapy. We must also consider reproductive and developmental unknowns. Use of potent metabolic agents in younger adults of childbearing potential raises questions about pregnancy-associated risks, fetal development, and intergenerational effects. Many such questions remain insufficiently studied. Finally, consider that side effects are not evenly distributed. Social determinants of health, nutritional status, age, baseline muscle mass, and comorbid psychiatric conditions will affect individual risk. That heterogeneity is why individual conversations between patient and clinician matter, and why mass marketing messages that imply uniform benefit are misleading. In sum, the biological cost of these drugs cannot be reduced to a single number. It is a multidimensional ledger. Digestive integrity, muscle preservation, endocrine stability, cognitive well-being, and long-term organ safety all enter the calculus. The wisest path forward requires humility, long-term data, individualized care, and a public conversation that does not sacrifice nuance for clicks. Next, we examine the social and emotional costs that compound the biological burden and shape lived experience for millions. Beyond spreadsheets and clinical endpoints, there is a human ledger that rarely appears in quarterly earnings calls: the emotional tidal pull that accompanies chronic therapy. When a medication becomes enmeshed with identity, self-worth, and daily routine, its consequences extend far beyond physiologic markers. That's the story of many people who took Ozempic or Wegovy expecting liberation and instead found a subtle form of captivity. First, consider identity and agency. Weight is not merely a physical attribute. It is wrapped in social meaning. For people who have long struggled with body image and cultural stigma, rapid weight change can trigger complex psychological reactions. Praise and validation come from new social attention, but they can also tether self-worth to external appearance in dangerous ways. When that appearance depends on a pharmacologic maintenance program, the psyche may bind self-esteem to the continuation of dosing, making cessation an existential risk. Second, relationship shift. Partners, friends, and family members react to visible change in unpredictable ways. In some cases, an individual's newfound confidence strengthens relationships. In others, it exposes fissures. Food rituals that once bonded families become awkward. A partner may feel replaced or insecure. A parent may worry that their child's use of medication signals deeper issues. There are accounts of couples renegotiating roles and priorities, often under stress. The person on medication faces constant social negotiation: how much to explain, when to hide the regimen, whether to accept credit for results that are pharmacologically mediated. Third, the guilt economy. Financial strain is rarely experienced in isolation. It bleeds into moral calculus. Many patients internalize economic hardship as personal failure, despite systemic determinants that shape affordability. Stories abound of people skipping other medicines, delaying dental care, or foregoing healthy foods to afford monthly injections. The psychological toll of such trade-offs includes shame, resentment, and a deteriorating sense of control. This is not merely anecdotal. Social science documents the mental health consequences of medical debt and forced prioritization. Fourth, dependence on medical validation emerges as a new axis of anxiety. Prescription maintenance often requires documentation, lab tests, weight logs, and clinician notes. For some, these interactions feel like ongoing surveillance rather than supportive care. The worry that an insurer may decide a therapy is no longer necessary creates a background anxiety. This approval anxiety pervades daily life for many, undermining stability. Fifth, stigma evolves. Historically, weight stigma existed mainly toward those perceived as overweight. Now, stigma divides along lines of access. A person using GLP-1 therapy may receive both praise for taking control and condemnation for cheating or taking a shortcut. Social media intensifies this schism. Curated success stories create pressure to conform, while detractors offer moralizing commentary. The result is a polarized social environment where public conversations about weight are sharper and less forgiving. Sixth, workplace pressures transform. Employers and insurers are part of a larger ecosystem. Some employers incentivize weight loss as part of wellness plans. Others may implicitly prefer employees who show fewer health claims. These dynamics can create subtle coercion where workers feel nudged toward pharmacologic solutions to meet productivity or insurance metrics. The outcome is unequal access and a new set of workplace expectations tied to pharmacologic enhancement. Seventh, intergenerational impacts surface. Parents weigh decisions with children in mind. Should a mother on therapy breastfeed? What are developmental consequences if conception occurs during treatment? People delay family planning or alter life choices because chronic therapy complicates travel, pregnancy planning, and other major life events. Eighth, coping mechanisms that people use can be hazardous. Rationing doses, seeking unregulated sources, or attempting patchwork alternatives are survival strategies that increase risk. Online forums offer community and solace, but also spread misinformation. These grassroots responses demonstrate resilience, but also reveal a system failing to provide accessible, sustainable support. Finally, we must ask a cultural question. What does it mean when a society normalizes pharmacologic intervention as the primary route to social acceptability? As more people adopt injections as a means to conform, social norms shift, potentially marginalizing those who cannot access such treatments and increasing pressure on young people to seek pharmacologic solutions for social acceptance. This is the social cost, diffuse, systemic, and deeply human. Up next, we expose how industry forces and policy choices amplify these dynamics, creating feedback loops that entrench dependence and inequality. To fully grasp the scale of what we are seeing, you must understand the infrastructure that amplifies certain medical narratives. Pharmaceuticals do not operate in a vacuum. Their success depends on clinical pipelines, regulatory environments, marketing ecosystems, provider relationships, and importantly, policy architecture. Each of these levers can be nudged to favor persistence over cure, and together they form an industry that is extraordinarily efficient at converting medical need into economic return. Begin with research and development incentives. Drug development requires vast capital, and companies must justify that investment to shareholders. The return model prefers products with predictable long-term revenue streams. A curative therapy, one-time or short course, that eliminates disease would be excellent for patients, but the business model for such a therapy is structurally less attractive. Fewer recurring sales. Chronic medications that require ongoing dosing, by contrast, align economics with continued usage. Next, regulatory dynamics play a role. Regulators evaluate safety and efficacy based on submitted trial data, which is typically generated under controlled conditions and for specified durations. The approval process is rigorous, but by design it focuses on selected endpoints in relatively homogeneous populations. The approval does not replace long-term real-world evidence, and post-marketing surveillance is meant to capture long-term and rare events. But historically, surveillance has suffered from underreporting and limited incentives for robust follow-up. Creating time lags before risks are fully appreciated, marketing and medical education are crucial levers. Direct-to-consumer advertising normalizes treatments quickly. Simultaneously, companies fund continuing medical education, sponsor key opinion leaders, and underwrite professional conferences. These activities shape clinician priorities, what endpoints they emphasize, what questions they ask, and what patient populations are framed as ideal candidates. Over time, such shaping has measurable effects on prescribing norms. Access architecture, PBMs, insurers, specialty pharmacies, and patient assistance programs also matters. PBMs negotiate rebates and formularies, sometimes privileging certain products for reasons beyond pure clinical superiority. Specialty pharmacies manage supply chains, often providing services that increase persistence, like auto-refill and home delivery. Patient assistance programs can make therapy feasible for some, but they can also tether patients to branded supply streams. Lobbying and policy influence are important too. Manufacturers invest in advocacy to secure favorable reimbursement structures, patent protections, and regulatory frameworks that support long-term use. Academic and clinical research funding patterns further influence the landscape. Where capital flows, studies follow. Areas that threaten profitable status quos may receive less attention or slower follow-up. Taken together, these elements create a landscape where persistence is rewarded, economically and institutionally. Clinicians are encouraged to see persistence as a marker of success. Patients are nudged by advertising and social proof. Insurers navigate opaque cost-benefit calculations. Institutions receive funding that aligns with certain research priorities. Change requires structural shifts in many places at once. Next, we turn to the evidence often dismissed or buried, the small studies. Clinician observations and patient testimonies that complicate the dominant narrative. When medical truths collide with entrenched interests, friction points arise. Documents that never make the front page, small trials left unreplicated, path-breaking observations dismissed as statistical noise. Our task is to excavate these artifacts and see whether a coherent pattern emerges. Start with independent labs and small academic groups. Not every informative study is blockbuster funded. Over the past 2 decades, many modest trials and observational cohorts explored incretin biology, diet-induced incretin modulation, and gut-host interactions. Some show promising signals for non-pharmacologic modulation of GLP-1 pathways. Others record physiologic shifts after cessation of analog therapy. When taken as isolated studies, these signals may appear tentative, but together they form a mosaic that deserves larger-scale validation. Whistleblowers appear in the margins. Clinicians noting recurrent patterns, unforeseen adverse responses, reproducible rebound dynamics, or troubling quality-of-life issues have sometimes raised concerns through letters to editors. Internal safety reports or regulatory submissions. Some report administrative pushback when observations complicate commercial narratives. Safety reports can be archived rather than amplified. This is not universal, but it is a pattern that merits attention. Patient forums are a crucial reservoir of lived evidence. Online communities contain first-hand accounts of benefits and harms. While individual posts are anecdotal, signal detection techniques can aggregate patterns, persistent nausea, disproportionate muscle loss, dramatic rebound after cessation that warrant formal epidemiologic study. These digital signals are increasingly used by researchers to generate hypotheses worthy of rigorous follow-up. Regulatory documents sometimes reveal redactions and summary choices that obscure nuance. Elevated rates of rare events can be downplayed in summary tables or classed inconclusive without transparent rationale. When follow-up studies are deferred or underfunded, the public has little chance to see the whole picture. International observations are valuable. Different diets, health systems, and prescribing cultures generate diverse experiences. Comparative epidemiology, what is happening in parts of Asia, the Mediterranean, or rural communities can reveal alternative pathways and protective cultural practices that provide insight into non-pharmacologic modulation of metabolic health. Finally, leaked memos and early-stage market analysis, when they surface, show strategic priorities, emphasis on patient retention, expected lifetime revenue, and market expansion. Such documents reveal how industry views product lifecycle and patient dependency, not a proof of bad intent, but a clear depiction of commercial assumptions. When assembled, these fragments form a worrying mosaic: short-term efficacy paired with uncertain long-term cost, institutional incentives toward persistence, and societal adoption before comprehensive understanding. As investigators, we assemble these pieces and ask, what are the ethical and public health implications, and how do we create a more transparent conversation? Next, we map alternatives and discuss what evidence shows about non-pharmacologic pathways and pragmatic strategies. By now, the contours are clear. A powerful drug class entered the mainstream rapidly, offering benefits but also embedding incentives for persistent use. Is there another path? Ways to achieve durable metabolic benefit that don't depend on indefinite pharmacologic maintenance? This section explores the landscape of alternatives, what they can realistically offer, and why they remain underutilized. Lifestyle interventions remain foundational. Diet, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction demonstrably affect metabolic health. Large trials show effectiveness in reducing diabetes incidence. The challenge is scale. Behavior change requires sustained coaching, environmental support, and long-term resources, elements that demand investment comparable to drug access programs, but with less immediate industry profit. Incremental medical strategies exist: off-label approaches, combination drug regimens with different risk profiles, and optimized use of older medications. These tactics sometimes reduce reliance on GLP-1 analogs but require careful clinician oversight and patient engagement. Nutritional and botanical research hints at modulators of incretin responses. Polyphenols, bitter compounds, and fermented foods may influence endogenous GLP-1 secretion. Early-phase studies suggest potential benefits. The gut microbiome is another frontier. Microbial metabolites interact with bile acid signaling and incretin biology. Translational science here is promising, but nascent. Policy shifts can also be transformative. Pricing negotiation, broader preventive care investment, and redesign of wellness incentives to prioritize sustainable health, not short-term weight metrics, would alter incentives dramatically. Community-based interventions, group medical visits, peer-led programs, and culturally tailored initiatives often yield durable results but require structural support. Honest, well-funded replication studies and public funding for long-term outcomes are essential. If independent science can validate non-pharmacologic pathways, policy and practice can follow. For now, a mixed approach, transparent discussion, shared decision-making, and equitable access remains the pragmatic path forward. In the next segment, we bring this investigation to a head. We will point to the primary documents, patient accounts, and studies that formed this narrative and describe how you can access the full dossier. We followed the story from glossy advertising to kitchen tables, from stockholder language to the physiological ledger beneath the skin. The through line is unavoidable. A technology that offers clear, often dramatic benefits has entered the marketplace very quickly, accompanied by economic models and social currents that push toward persistence and away from less lucrative alternatives. That does not negate the genuine value some patients have experienced. It simply means that value exists within a system that shapes usage and access in specific ways. What we can say with confidence is this: the decision to start or continue these medications cannot be made lightly. It must be rooted in transparent information about likely benefits, potential harms, and the financial commitment entailed. For clinicians, the imperative is shared decision-making with ongoing reassessment and concerns for long-term function, not a single episodic prescription that becomes indefinite by default. For patients and families, the imperative is to ask tough questions, seek second opinions, and gather as much clear evidence as possible before making lifelong decisions. Ask your clinician what the plan is if you stop the medication. Ask about reassessment timelines and what measures will be used to determine ongoing need. Demand clarity about costs, assistance programs, and realistic expectations for maintenance. Consider integrated approaches that pair pharmacologic options with nutritional support, resistance exercise, and psychosocial counseling. Practical note about evidence. Our team compiled documents, studies, conference posters, redacted safety reports, translated international studies, and anonymized patient accounts. Many resources are not readily accessible to the public, behind paywalls in small journals or tucked in appendices. Because of that, we assembled a consolidated dossier, the core documents, annotated translations, and a plain language guide to the evidence. That dossier also summarizes independent research into non-pharmacologic pathways that may support endogenous incretin function, with candid notes on the level of evidence. If you want to see that material, the primary sources, the charts, and the anonymized interviews, we've made it available in a hidden video and a downloadable evidence pack linked in the description below. This is the only place we host the full evidence set. It is not publicly promoted because much of it is technical and can be misinterpreted without context. We offer it for people who want to dig, verify, and make fully informed choices. Important caveat: the material we provide is educational, not medical advice. The scientific literature evolves, and definitive long-term conclusions require replication. Consult a licensed clinician familiar with your history before making medical decisions. This conversation is not about alarmism. It is about agency. It is a call to insist that medical options be presented honestly, that economic incentives not obscure clinical judgment, and that patients have access to the full set of alternatives. Change starts when more people have better information and when systems are held accountable for their incentives. If you want to explore the evidence in full, click the link in the description to access the hidden video and the downloadable pack. See the papers. Read the redacted memos. Decide for yourself. We will continue digging, translating complex science into accessible truths, and presenting marginalized evidence that helps people make wiser choices. Thank you for watching.